Messages from the same sender kept popping up on my smartphone's messaging app. The sender was my son, Andrew. For 9 years, my son who despised me, a single mother. The messages were about child support and living expenses, asking for financial help. It's been a year since I cut ties with him. It was he himself who decided to go with my ex-husband, Mike, and I can't forget the things Mike said to me. "It doesn't concern me anymore." So, I didn't respond to the messages and gradually stopped caring. A few days later, just when I was enjoying my day off, someone banged on my front door loudly.
"I know you're in there. I know it."
Cautiously, I opened the door to find Andrew standing there.
"You saw the messages, right? Where's the money? Fulfill your duty as a mom."
His demanding attitude without any greeting left me speechless. The sneer on his face was unsettling, almost as if he was looking down on me. Even though he called me mom, his eyes no longer viewed me as a mother. I stood firm and replied, "What are you talking about? I'm not your mother."
"What? What are you saying?"
"Well, actually, Thinking he probably hadn't heard the full story from Mike, I calmly explained the truth.
"What?"
His face turned pale as he realized the unexpected truth in my words. "My name is Jennifer, a fairly ordinary 49-year-old temporary employee. I divorced my husband a long time ago and have been raising Andrew as a single mother while working as a temporary employee. He was always curious and showed interest in everything. Raising him while working was tough, but I tried to give him all the love I could every day. After all, he didn't have a father. So, I always felt I had to be strong for him. Sometimes, with the help of my parents, Andrew grew up well."
"Mom, what was my dad like?"
Still, there were times when he felt sad about not having a father. I knew he longed for the happy families he saw on TV with both a mom and a dad. Each time, it broke my heart. But I never intended to let his dad Mike meet him. Mike wasn't even trying to pay child support, nor was he attempting to contact me. I didn't want Andrew to see such an unreliable father.
"Well,
Mike was someone who neglected young Andrew and went out to have fun as he pleased. Even when I was sick, he wouldn't help with child-rearing or even go grocery shopping. He was increasingly absent from home and started coming back late at night. When I asked him what he was doing,
"It's none of your business,"
he'd say. After investigating, I found out he was cheating with a younger woman. On top of that, he got addicted to gambling, wasting so much money that managing household finances became tough. I had to quit the cooking classes I loved, losing my only emotional support and feeling utterly miserable. Mike's mood would be swayed by his gambling wins and losses, leading him to treat me horribly at times. That's why I decided to divorce him. There was no way I could leave our son with such a person, so I took custody. Because of various circumstances, I am raising Andrew on my own. However, I couldn't tell him the truth, so I decided to keep things vague. He's a hopeless person. He always did terrible things to me."
"What kind of terrible things?"
"I'll tell you when you're older. Now, let's have dinner. Today, we're having your favorite hamburgers."
"Really? Yay! Mom, your cooking is always great, but I love hamburgers the most."
As I watched Andrew's innocent smile, I made a firm decision to protect that smile at all costs. But the problem arose when Andrew was in 3rd grade.
"Mom, listen. My summer vacation essay won an award."
"Really? That's amazing." Andrew loves catching bugs and running around outside, and he always does his homework reluctantly. The fact that his summer vacation essay won such a big award was a surprise. He usually hated sitting at his desk, But this time he was unusually motivated, researching by himself, which made his achievement even more special.
See, I told you. If you work hard, good things will happen. You did great. I'm so proud of you. Yeah, I'm going to try harder.
I hoped this experience would boost his confidence and motivate him to study more. With that in mind, I decided to make a slightly more elaborate dinner that night. The good news didn't stop there for Andrew and me. His essay won a big award and was published in the local newspaper. He became a local celebrity overnight. I was so proud that I kept a clipping of the newspaper article.
Maybe I shouldn't let it go to his head, but as a parent, this much is normal, right?
What kind of adult will he become? He's a child who can do anything if he really tries. He can envision any future he wants. As I thought about this, I proudly looked at the newspaper clipping I had pinned on the corkboard. My smartphone vibrated, playing its short ringtone. The familiar sound seemed ominous this time, and I found myself opening the phone's screen. There was the name Mike. No way. Unable to hide my confusion and agitation, I nervously opened the message.
I saw the newspaper article. I heard Andrew won an award for his essay. I'm proud of him as my son. Is there a time we could meet?
What's all of a sudden?
It was a message from Mike asking to meet Andrew. Without hesitation, I decided to send a reply refusing his request. The message was solely about wanting to meet, with no apology for not paying child support or for not keeping in touch. It was too late now, just because he saw his success. I had no intention of letting him see. But the messages from Mike continued. Can I see Andrew just once? He must be lonely without a father. I just want to talk to grown-up Andrew since I missed so much. Can you tell me where you live? I heard he got an award. I want to give him something to celebrate. Just one time, please.
So persistent.
Mike's determination seemed strong, as messages began arriving more frequently, eventually one per day. What might appear as sincere and polite in his messages felt odd. What is he planning? I couldn't stop feeling suspicious about him. As days went by, every time I received a message from Mike, I would let out a big sigh. The sound of my phone's notification made me feel depressed, even when I was spending time with Andrew.
What's wrong, Mom? Why do you look so sad all the time? You haven't been yourself lately.
One day, while I was playing with Andrew at a nearby park, he asked me this with a worried expression. Andrew had been playing soccer with his friends from the neighborhood. I felt guilty and tried to put on a bright smile.
I'm sorry for making you worry, Andrew.
It's nothing. If it's nothing, then you can tell me. I can listen to your problems too, you know.
Andrew, thank you.
I was a little surprised, but seeing Andrew genuinely care about me made me almost tear up. He had grown up so much, enough to worry about his adult mother. I hugged Andrew tightly and decided to at least tell him the reason, so he wouldn't worry anymore. The truth is, your dad said he wants to see you, Andrew.
What, Dad?
He was visibly shocked, as he never expected this. Every time Andrew asked me about his father, I always told him, he's not a good person, and you shouldn't be like him. Andrew was a smart kid, so he probably avoided bringing it up because he knew it upset me. Contrary to my bitter feelings, Andrew seemed happy that his father wanted to see him, his face lighting up.
Mom, I want to meet Dad.
Andrew had always felt the absence of a father since he was little. Of course, he would want to meet him. But I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't a good idea for Andrew to see Mike.
I understand how you feel, Andrew. But he's really a bad person. I'll protect you from him.
I placed my hand on his shoulder, almost as if convincing myself. Andrew still seemed unconvinced, but quietly nodded and went back to playing soccer with his friends. Looking back, I regret not being firmer with him about this. A few days later, I received another message from Mike. Lately, I had been deleting his messages without reading them, but this time, the subject line caught my eye. It read, "I met Andrew. I met Andrew today. As expected of my son. He was a very polite and smart boy. He was very happy to meet me. I think it's not a good idea for you to restrict Andrew's actions too much."
That's not possible. How could that happen?
My mind went blank, and I dropped my smartphone on the spot. I hadn't told Andrew much about Mike. He didn't know his contact details or address. Moreover, Mike didn't live within a distance a third grader could reach on his own. Feeling a bad premonition, I checked the message history and found outgoing messages I didn't recognize. It turned out that Andrew had been secretly messaging Mike. Mike's replies included asking for the name of Andrew's school, saying he would pick him up after school. I felt like I had been betrayed by the child I had cherished and raised.
I'm home. Andrew, you went to see your dad, didn't you? I told you not to.
As soon as I heard Andrew's voice coming home, I couldn't help but raise my voice to scold him. But Andrew, with a delighted smile, proudly showed off a brand new soccer ball he was holding.
But Dad wasn't like you said. He was really nice, and look, he even bought me the soccer ball I wanted. And other things too.
Andrew showed me a bag full of snacks.
Look, he bought me all these snacks too.
He was beaming with joy. Indeed, Andrew had been saying he wanted a soccer ball for a while. He had seen his friends' balls and wanted one for himself. But with our tight budget, I could only give vague responses. Moreover, the ball Andrew had was a high-end one, like those used by professional soccer players. Not something a child would use for occasional park play.
No, you can't have such an expensive soccer ball. You only play soccer with your friends about once a month, right? Do you really need it?
Andrew might not yet understand the proper value of money. I stopped yelling at Andrew and tried to encourage him to think for himself, but he wouldn't listen.
But I wanted my own ball. And you hardly ever buy me snacks.
But you won't eat this many, will you? You won't have room for dinner.
When I said this, Andrew, frustrated, quickly put down his bag and shoved me angrily.
You're so stingy, Mom.
Andrew.
You can't talk to me like that.
Andrew ignored my scolding and stomped off to his room, making exaggeratedly loud footsteps. I could only watch him go and let out a deep sigh. Certainly, I might have made Andrew put up with a lot of things. But I had also tried to shower him with love. The thought that my love hadn't gotten through to him made me sad. From that point on, Andrew started saying things like,
"I wish I lived with Dad instead."
More frequently,
"If I lived with Dad, I'd get the snacks I want, and he'd get me soccer balls, gloves, and toys."
Each time I heard Andrew say this, I felt a mix of helplessness and frustration. Our life wasn't affluent. This was why Andrew envied Mike, who was free with his money. Even if Andrew threw hurtful words at me, I didn't want him to turn out like Mike. I kept telling him, "Don't waste money, and if you work hard and stay honest, good things will happen." But my words seemed to fall on deaf ears as Andrew started secretly going to Mike's place. As proof, Mike would mockingly send me messages about what he and Andrew had done and what he had bought for him that day.
Andrew, you went to his place again, didn't you? Stop nagging. It's fine.
Andrew wasn't home when I returned late from work. He finally came home much later in the night. He must have gone to Mike's house after school. I raised my eyebrows in anger, but Andrew looked annoyed, as if my words were bothersome.
Dad gives me pocket money. Unlike you.
With that, Andrew showed me a bundle of $100 bills inside an envelope.
This is too much money for a child to have. It's none of your business. He gave it to me, so what?
Andrew plugged his ears to block me out, ran upstairs, and shouted,
I'm not eating dinner.
His clothes smelled like a steakhouse. I had never taken Andrew out for expensive meals because of the cost. Still, I had always tried to make nutritious and delicious meals with the knowledge I gained from cooking classes. I thought the skills I learned in cooking class would be useful in situations like this. Looking at the cold dinner in the living room, I felt like I was about to cry. Still, I managed to raise Andrew properly for 9 years. Although we started clashing more often and he stayed out more frequently, I saw it as part of his growing up. Andrew is now a high school student. Mike and I still haven't met in person. But Andrew seemed to keep in touch with Mike. Andrew uses the allowance he gets from Mike to travel alone or buy expensive game consoles. We often miss each other at home, but he does well in school and receives praise from his teachers. However, I can't help but feel that Andrew studies just to get money from Mike. Because after every test, he always goes to Mike's place. He hides the envelope in his bag and sneaks back home late at night. I'm tired of nagging him, and since he's in high school now, I thought it better not to interfere too much with what he wants to do. Then one day, I received a different kind of message from Mike. When I opened it, for the first time, it said, I want to meet with you, Jennifer. I want to talk about something important regarding Andrew's future. Can we meet this weekend?
That's right. Andrew will be in college next year, and it's a good time to discuss his future and what's been happening.
I thought about it for a while and then replied with a message agreeing to meet. There were things I had been wanting to talk about regarding Andrew. It was about time I faced Mike directly. Over the past 9 years, Mike has been spoiling Andrew, but he didn't seem to be doing anything terrible to him. Maybe he truly cares about our son. Maybe he is serious about discussing his future. Gradually, I began to think this way. With a faint hope, I went to the designated restaurant with Andrew. But as soon as Mike met us, he said, Jennifer, I want to live with Andrew.
What? Do you know what you're saying?
My faint hope was shattered into pieces. I thought we would be discussing child support, living expenses, Andrew's college plans, and how to manage tuition. But Mike had the same sly grin as before. It was a face that indicated he was up to no good again. Although I felt crushed, I quickly composed myself. After all, I decided to take care of Andrew until he could stand on his own. Of course, I feel bad about putting all the burden on you, Jennifer. So from now on, I will also.
Don't be ridiculous. There's no way I'm letting you take Andrew now.
I don't think handing Andrew over to Mike would have a positive impact on him. Mike neglected Andrew and me, spoiling Andrew without providing any real support. And now, wanting to take him just because he's grown up is too convenient. It's absolutely unforgivable, and I've rejected him fiercely, but Mike remained unshaken. Really? What do you think, Andrew? Mike asked Andrew in a gentle voice. Andrew, who had been shrinking from his parents' argument, straightened up when he realized his opinion was being sought.
I want to stay with Dad, not Mom.
See?
No. Andrew, think carefully. Do you really understand what you're saying?
Mike smirked triumphantly. In contrast, I was unable to think at all. I couldn't believe that Andrew would say such a thing. I couldn't accept the reality in front of me. Isn't it a parent's duty to respect their child's wishes?
Don't you dare say that.
The next emotion I felt was intense anger. For 9 years, Mike had been giving Andrew pocket money and spoiling him, not out of concern for him, but all for this day. Unable to hold back, I shouted without caring about the people around us.
Andrew, you're old enough now, so I'll tell you. This man used to gamble and cheat all the time. Sometimes he even hit me. Even now, he's probably planning to have you support him while he gambles away.
I was certain of it. Mike's reckless spending back then was beyond imagination. He accumulated debts almost daily, ranging from small amounts of $10 to large sums that would take years to repay. I can't count how many times I believed Mike's words of "I'm sorry, I'll never do it again," only to be betrayed. I can never trust him again.
That's going too far, Mom.
No, it's not. In reality, this man...
Stop it, Jennifer. You're embarrassing yourself in front of him.
I tried to make him understand by telling him the truth, but Mike, with his triumphant expression, interrupted.
Besides, gambling is just a bit of adult entertainment. It's no different from you taking cooking classes. You've always tried to restrict our freedom, haven't you, Jennifer?
With Mike's deliberately provocative words, Andrew lifted his head as if recalling something. He glared at me as if to say Mike was right.
Yeah, Mom always tells me I can't do this, I can't do that. No! I'm saying it for your sake.
For our sake? Weren't you just worried about running out of your own money?
That's not true.
A tumultuous mix of sadness, anger, and an unbearable pain swirled in my chest. Sure, our life wasn't affluent, and there were times when it might have felt miserable. Coming home late from work was routine, and young Andrew must have felt lonely. But I worked hard all this time to support and guide Andrew towards a bright future. Had none of that reached him? Why do I have to be told such things? Why am I being portrayed as the villain? It was incomprehensible and unbearably sad.
Fine. If you feel that way, you can live with Mike. I'll leave. Just don't involve me anymore.
Feeling incredibly exhausted, I said those words. Mike smiled with satisfaction.
Well then, he's our kid now.
Seeing Andrew nodding with genuine happiness, I realized that to him, I was nothing more than a burden. I left the place in silence. After that, I decided to return to my parents' home. I handed over the apartment where Andrew and I had been living to Mike. Although I told them to find another place to live, Andrew still had his high school life. When he insisted that moving far away would disrupt his commuting, I had no choice but to concede. I then started afresh, enjoying a fulfilling life in the countryside where my parents lived. When I suddenly returned home, my parents welcomed me warmly, listening to my story with deep empathy, and said, "Take your time and rest as long as you need." Returning to my parents' house, I resigned from my previous job and started a new one locally. I became a kitchen staff member at a restaurant. It began when I heard that a restaurant run by an elderly couple I knew was at risk of closing due to their health issues, and I offered to help if I could. The restaurant wasn't very large, but it was always busy with customers. I enjoyed running the restaurant, chatting with regular customers, and was happy to use what I had learned in cooking classes. In this way, I stopped worrying about them and led a peaceful life. About a year after parting ways with Andrew, while organizing data on my smartphone, I logged into my old email account for the first time in a while and noticed a message that had been there for several months. The sender was Andrew. Reading it, I found it was a request for various expenses like tuition and educational costs.
But this no longer concerns me.
Andrew was already out of my hands. It was Andrew himself who decided to go with Mike. I quickly lost interest in it. However, a few days later,
You're in there, aren't you? I know you are.
While I was relaxing at home on a day off from the restaurant, there was a loud knock on the front door. Cautiously, I opened the door to find Andrew standing there. On seeing me, he gave a smirk resembling someone I knew and said,
You saw my message, didn't you? Where's the money? Fulfill your duty as a mother. I even came all the way here to tell you.
I was taken aback by Andrew's changed demeanor, demanding money without even a greeting. He was clearly influenced by Mike. His once neat hair was now dull, and his clothes, perhaps second-hand, looked shabby. It was evident at a glance that things were not going well financially. The smile on his lips was somehow nasty, as if looking down on me. Though he called me mother, his gaze was no longer that of a son towards his mother. I responded firmly.
I don't know what you're talking about. I'm not your mother.
Huh, what are you saying? Seeing him laugh through his nose, I realized Mike hadn't told him the full story, and decided to reveal the truth.
In fact, I'm not your biological mother. Huh?
Andrew's real mother passed away shortly after childbirth due to health complications, leaving baby Andrew behind. I couldn't ignore Mike struggling with the fussy baby on the bus, so I helped him. Then, feeling affection for baby Andrew, who lost his mother early, and Mike, who seemed clueless about what to do, I decided to marry him. After that, it was as I had told Andrew. Mike had a terrible gambling habit, constantly cheated and neglected him. At this rate, not only would it have a bad influence on Andrew, but all three of them would be ruined. With that in mind, I decided to go through with the divorce. As I continued my explanation, he began to tremble with anger. To add insult to injury, I continued.
Actually, when I married Mike, I didn't go through with the adoption paperwork. What? What do you mean? So from the very beginning, I had no obligation to pay child support for you or guarantee his living situation.
Still, the reason I took care of him was because I felt sorry for him as a young child. I didn't want him to become someone like Mike. I wanted Andrew to have a bright future, so I did my best to treat him like a mother would. However, realizing that my efforts and affection hadn't gotten through to him, I was struck by an indescribable feeling of emptiness.
Mike probably told you I had an obligation to pay child support. But that's not true. Andrew and I are complete strangers.
Gripping the smartphone that had exchanged so many one-sided messages, I calmly conveyed the truth. Andrew's face visibly turned pale. The shock must have been immense, as he fell to his knees on the spot. Throwing a tantrum, he shouted,
That's a lie!
But this was the truth. The messages I had been receiving from Andrew contained not only demands for money, but also complaints about his life with his dad. If he didn't do the housework properly, Mike would yell at him. He apparently had a gambling addiction and would sometimes go on rampages on bad days. He would come home drunk and act arrogantly, pushing him to his limit. And he blamed it all on me, for abandoning him and not fulfilling my parental duties. At this rate, their relationship could hardly be called good. I knew it well, having lived with him. Even if they seemed to be living a wealthy life after I left, it was only on the surface. He had a tendency to spend money like water. There was hardly any savings left, and I was probably the only one they could rely on. Moreover, I had heard from close neighbors that Andrew's health had been declining due to stress since living with Mike. His grades and reputation in high school had plummeted, and he apparently failed his college entrance exams too. I had been attentive to the neighborhood relationships, so a few months after returning to my parents' home. Jennifer, why haven't you been home lately? I got a message saying. When I explained the situation, the neighbors were outraged on my behalf, so they must be casting a harsh gaze on Andrew and Mike too. The fact that those two had driven me out had become known to those around us.
No way! Mom, Jennifer, please! I'm really struggling to get by. I truly regret everything. Please help me.
Andrew's attitude completely changed from looking down on me to desperately begging, groveling on the ground. Let's live together like before. I was wrong. Dad turned out to be a horrible person. It's my fault for not believing you, Mom. However, I know that even if I lend them money now, they will just repeat the same thing again. It pained me a little to see Andrew, whom I raised with my own hands, pleading so desperately, but I refused.
No, please go home now. Like I said, I am not your mother.
Don't say that. Mom, please, I'm begging you. I tried to close the front door, but he clung on, not giving up. Seeing no signs of giving up, I was at a loss for what to do when I heard a calm voice call out to me from behind. What's going on, Jennifer?
Kevin.
The person who came was a solidly built man. He must have heard the commotion at the front door and purposely come from the back room. Andrew grimaced at the appearance of an unfamiliar man who didn't look like my parents.
That's right, Andrew. This is Kevin, my boyfriend. He's a police officer.
Nice to meet you, Andrew. I've heard about you from Jennifer.
A police officer?
Andrew let out a strange cry of surprise. Kevin is a local police officer. We met when he stopped by the restaurant as a customer during his work breaks, shortly after I started working there. Kevin is a great listener, never getting bored of any conversation and always nodding along calmly. As we shared small talk, I ended up telling him about my reasons for coming back home and about Mike and Andrew, and he showed deep empathy for that as well. As we talked, we grew attracted to each other, and now we're dating. Kevin looked down at him sitting on the ground. So, is the conversation over? And asked. I nodded firmly.
Yes, it's over. But Mom...
Andrew let out a scream-like yell. Kevin's steady gaze, he couldn't say anything more. He seemed to be shrinking back at the fact that he was a police officer. In other words, he was probably aware that he and Mike were in the wrong. Andrew stood there motionless for a while, looking like he wanted to say something, but eventually his shoulders completely slumped and he left, hanging his head. After that, it seems he moved out of the house. Unable to go to college, he apparently looked for a job, but he's been hopping from one workplace to another due to constant interpersonal issues. Even when he manages to stay in one place, it seems he takes after Mike in his loose spending habits and quickly causes some kind of trouble. Until recently, I had been receiving messages alternately from them, pleading for help with their financial difficulties. However, as soon as I started forwarding those to Kevin's lawyer acquaintance, they completely stopped coming. I have no way of knowing what will become of them in the future. In a month, Kevin and I have our wedding. My local friends and parents are overjoyed for me as if it were their own happiness. I will likely continue to live peacefully while running the restaurant. Perhaps I should think up a new menu to commemorate the marriage, I thought as I opened the pure white notebook that would soon be filled with vibrant colors.